So oil companies, let me start here. So oil companies are ordered to help, or are currently at the process of the potential to be ordered to help clean up the Gulf.
We
And what
are
does that mean? So the
raging.
plan is to retire all of the old wells in the Gulf of Mexico. Like all these, there's hundreds of them that exist there that all the oil rigs and everybody were using to mine oil out of them. And as they age, they present issues, environmental issues. Companies don't want them anymore, so they sell them off. Right? They sell them off as part of going uh, uh, zero carbon emissions. Is kind of working your way past all these wells and getting rid of all these old assets. So they sell them to companies. The only problem is, what if those companies don't have the financial means to deal with that pipeline or to deal with that well? Well, the current thing is happening to Fieldwood Energy LLC, which a federal judge ruled that they could pass on hundreds of millions of dollars in environmental liabilities to prior owners and insurers of the wells as part of a reorganization plan. They're filing for bankruptcy. They're reorganizing their company, and they said, "Listen, we can't pay for this. We think that the owners of these, the original owners that sold them to us, that they should have to pitch in and help uh, to do this." So Exxon, BP, Hess, Royal Dutch Shell, and a lot of the insurance companies in the space obviously objected to this. They said, "No way, we don't want to spend money on this." Um, and an appeal is still possible. So it's still very much in process. This is what's being discussed. But some estimates top $300 to $400 million of liability in terms of cost. Some estimates top $1 billion for some of these companies that would have to pay. For insurance companies are going to pay a serious brunt of the payment because they issue what they call surety bonds. And surety bonds are really just ways of having insurance on a well or on its maintenance or on taking care of things. And you usually need them to actually run your operations, because you have to say, if you want to do this huge operation with all this risk, you need to have some kind of way of ensuring that you're going to be able to cover any damages or work that needs to be done. So insurance companies issue these surety bonds and put this money on the market as insurance and say, "Listen, yeah, we're just taking this money. It's here in case something happens, so you're safe." It's like having a driver's license and insurance. If you get into an accident, somebody can pay for it. And you don't just run someone through somebody's car and say, "Oh well, go pay for it yourself." Right? It's the same kind of thing. But one of the big kind of objections here from the insurers, that and some analysts are saying that, well, when this happens, if insurance companies start pulling their surety bonds from the markets because they don't want to risk themselves anymore because of this new legislation that may be passed, right, the new precedent that's formed in court cases, they wouldn't want to stake themselves and say, "Yeah, sure, I'll put out a surety bond," even though in reality, even if you sell that asset, I could wind up having to pay for it. So, and that could cause a problem because the oil and gas industry needs these surety bonds to exist. So that was kind of a little bit of a speculation there. I don't think it might not go that far, but that's what they're talking about. There's definitely going to be some big conversations of like $8 billion up in the air about how to deal with the Gulf of Mexico, old oil wells, and whether or not the previous owners, the big companies that kind of made them and used them, should be a part of paying to have them cleaned up and paying to have to deal with the maintenance and the retirement of these things. So
Is this going to drive up oil prices in any way, possibly?
no,
All
I
right,
don't
cool.
know. The oil prices are going to be driven by OPEC production and refinery. This could, depending on who is affected, how the legislation goes, depending if the market hasn't already baked in these prices, if you see more definitive results come out, that more definitive rulings, that could affect stock prices and companies that have to take short-term hits. So investors may revalue some of those investments in the short term, to account for a decrease in cash flow or bigger cost of expenditures for dealing with these. But I don't think it'll affect the cost of oil, because they're
Interesting.
trying to retire these things anyway, clean them up and move past them. So,
Sounds like good news. Good news, and unfortunate
thank
that
you.
there's possible consequences when these things aren't kept up or regulated, and so
Well, it's not even regulated. It's just that when they create them,
yeah.
they're fine. And then when they're done with them, they sell them to somebody and say, "It's your problem." But the reality is, well, if they can't deal with it and it creates environmental crises or creates big problems, well, that's all of our problem now. And the
Gotcha.
taxpayer may have to come out and say, "We have to fund a cleanup operation," which is bullshit. So if the option is between, should I have to pay for it or should Exxon have to take some of their revenue and pay for it, Exxon should pay for a little bit of money for
Exactly.
it, because this isn't just like we started a retail shop. It's like we made a well into the earth that mines resources out of it up to the surface. These things are a little more complicated. So I feel like just selling it off and saying it's not my problem in such a complex
It's
industry,
careless.
yeah, I don't think it's really gonna. I think they're gonna find some liability. Maybe not as
Gotcha.
much as is now, but I think they will find some liability
Mm,
to
Well,
help out.
definitely.
on that note.